From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Wednesday, September 24, 2025. Does paracetamol cause autism? It's the question blowing up the medical world after US President Donald Trump released official advice regarding the use of the common painkiller during pregnancy. Today, health editor Natasha Robinson joins us to unpack this complex issue.
I think we found an answer to autism. How about that?
This is part of a wide-ranging address given by US President Donald Trump at a memorial for conservative activist Charlie Kirk on Sunday.
Tomorrow, we're going to be talking in the Oval Office in the White House about autism, how it happens. I think it's going to be one of the most important news conferences I'll ever have, and I look so forward to it.
It was curious, given the circumstances. But on Monday, the president's message came into sharp relief.
First, effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good.
Flanked by Health Secretary Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., the president urged pregnant women to limit their use of acetaminophen, which is known as paracetamol in Australia, unless it's absolutely medically necessary.
But if you can't tough it out, if you can't do it, that's what you're going to have to do. You'll take a Tylenol, but it'll be very sparingly.
There is certainly no causation established here. That's the first thing to say.
Natasha Robinson is The Australian's health editor.
But I don't think that you can take the fact that there is not a definitive link established between the use of paracetamol in pregnancy and causation in terms of autism to completely dismiss what the administration in the USA has put on the agenda here. It's really important, I think, in this circumstance to sift through the heat and light that we see with Trump in everything that he says. And I would really encourage people to go and look at the policy in relation to this that the US Department of Health and Human Services has put out. And it's really interesting to go through that and see just how measured it actually is. Everything that I've heard in terms of response from experts shooting down these claims is actually documented in this information that they've put out there, including the fact that they openly admit that causation is in fact not established here. But I think what the whole point of this announcement is there are association studies, and there are many of them, and they have consistently shown a higher rate of autism, sometimes only a small difference, but nevertheless, that is consistent across many studies in terms of this slightly higher rates of autism among women who have taken paracetamol during pregnancy, and particularly late pregnancy seems to be the issue here. There are other studies that have disproven any association, a large Swedish study that many of the experts who are responding to this announcement are pointing to, which controlled for genetics essentially by examining siblings as well. And once they examined the siblings and their circumstances, they found that the association disappeared. But then there's yet again other studies that have looked at that Swedish study, and there's in particular a Harvard study that had some concerns with the way that that study was conducted. So look, it is safe to say here the evidence is mixed.
Let's do a quick fact check here.
And by the way, I think I can say that there are certain groups of people that don't take vaccines and don't take any pills that have no autism.
Donald Trump didn't actually seem too confident on this point.
Is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are are some studies that suggest that, yeah, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups. The Amish, as an example, they have essentially no autism.
I've had a little opportunity to have a bit of a look at these studies. First of all, the idea that there's no autism in the Amish communities is false. I think it's true, as far as I can see, that there is a lower rate of autism in Amish communities, and some of the material studies that I've looked at have indicated that it may be as much as 4 times lower, but it's unclear why that is. There does seem to have been an issue with a particular study around about 20 years ago in the US where there was some suggestions that because Amish families don't generally vaccinate their children, that was the reason they didn't have any autism. And I think that's been comprehensively debunked.
And you shouldn't give the child the Tylenol every time he's born and he goes and has a shot. You shouldn't give a Tylenol to that child.
So in relation to children, there is no evidence whatsoever that there's any problem giving paracetamol to your children. What the TGA recommends is that you follow the dosage instructions and you only give it as needed. So the general advice is to give it in the smallest possible dosage for the time that it is really required. Take the advice of your doctor. I know that doctors do often recommend it when people vaccinate their children. It's certainly not a clear-cut issue, and it's absolutely one that requires the advice of a doctor, not President Trump.
It can be something that's very dangerous to the woman's health. In other words, a fever that's very, very dangerous, and ideally a doctor's decision, because I think you shouldn't take it. And you shouldn't take it during the entire pregnancy. They may tell you that toward the end of the pregnancy, you shouldn't take it during the...
So, Natasha, what does the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is the health regulator here in Australia, what does it actually recommend for pregnant women where paracetamol is concerned?
The TGA in Australia classifies paracetamol as a Category A drug in pregnancy, which means that it generally considers it safe. It does say that it should only be taken where necessary, and it should be taken at the lowest possible dose for the shortest possible time. And I think the important thing in relation to paracetamol that is the biggest consideration here is that people don't always use it just for pain. People often use it to control fever. And that's actually very important in pregnancy because fever uncontrolled can be dangerous for the fetus and can trigger premature birth. So it is an important factor, and that's also acknowledged by the US Health Department. And that's what many experts are saying to pregnant women in the wake of this is if you have a fever, don't let it run. It's better to take paracetamol than to actually have a high fever that goes on and on.
Coming up, dangerous ideas make a Trump-era comeback. The idea that autism is caused by certain medications and vaccinations can be traced back to a paper published in the respected Lancet Medical Journal in the 1990s by British gastrointestinal doctor Andrew Wakefield. It said of a group of 12, 8 children who'd received the combined measles, mumps, rubella vaccine went on to develop autism. It was a global bombshell, but it was also wrong. It's since been determined Wakefield's methodology was flawed and his paper was retracted by The Lancet. But the ideas had taken hold, and they've undermined faith in vaccines ever since. Vaccines have saved millions of lives from diseases that used to kill people of all ages, from babies to adults. Now, anti-vaccine rhetoric has had a resurgence under the Trump administration, thanks to scepticism of high-ranking officials like RFK Jr. and even the president himself, who famously took the anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine during the COVID-19 pandemic against medical advice.
And they pump so much stuff into those beautiful little babies, it's a disgrace.
So I'd just say something about these comments by Trump in the first instance. Do not take your medical advice from the US president. Okay, a responsible president should be telling people to discuss these issues with their doctor. That is the first thing that I'd say. In relation to his general message, I think what is clear and agreed by everybody is that this is an incredibly complex condition that probably has a lot of complex drivers. We've studied the genetics. We know that there's a lot of genes involved with traits that are apparent in conditions of neurodiversity, including autism. The incredibly important other aspect here is the environmental factors, of which pharmaceuticals are one. It's incredibly complex to pin down those exact mechanisms, but what people believe is going on, and the foremost researchers in the world all agree, in terms of autism, it is driven by genetics and in combination with environmental factors which have an impact upon a person's genetics. I think the comment that Trump made about we think we've essentially figured autism out, we're going to fix it, is really unhelpful, because implicit in that comment is that this is a pathology that requires a medical fix. And with a condition like autism, of course, it's not helpful to speak about a condition which involves diversity in the way that people affected by neurodevelopmental conditions actually communicate, experience the world, etc., etc. And so essentially casting it as a problem that needs to be fixed, and we've found the answer, is very unhelpful and stigmatising for people with autism.
Natasha Robinson is The Australian's health editor. You can read all her reporting and analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au.